So I wanted to do a video for months, but I couldn't figure out what to make my video on. So today in my truck, I own a tree service, and today in my truck, I was driving home and just kind of thinking. I wasn't even really thinking about something to put onto YouTube, but just kind of out of the universe, out of the heavens, really. This thought dropped on me. It's not a new thought. I would say I've been spiritually awakened for approaching 4 years, at least three. And I've thought a lot about how that spiritual awakening took place, and specifically this idea of these two paths where, when I originally got spiritually awakened, which was due to me attempting suicide and successfully, attempting suicide. They brought me back to life. I died from carbon monoxide exposure, but they did bring me back, obviously. I had this massive spiritual awakening. I would call it a download of understanding, not knowledge, not information, none of that. Just a download of, hey, this makes sense. This makes complete sense. And so once that occurred, I really had two options. At the point, I didn't realize that those were really the two directions that I had to choose from. But my first option was to leave everything behind, go to some remote place, an island or India or some other place that wasn't where I'm from, is what it felt like, and just be at bliss. Just be extremely happy with finally understanding who and what I am and what I'm here for. That was my first option, and I thought quite a bit about that. I gave it quite a long thought. But I ultimately chose to stay here. Here meaning within a normal operating life, which is odd and funny because I really, up until the point of my spiritual awakening, my life was anything but normal. For most of my life, I was a drug addict. I was a functioning drug addict. I had a business. I worked hard. But my relationships with other people was a complete disaster. I never was able to really form any loving, lasting relationships. I typically tended to leave before anyone really got to know me because I hated myself so much. I didn't want other people figuring out why they should hate me too. But I wanted to give it a go. Like I wanted to live in this world, but not be of this world, if that makes sense. And I wanted to go through all the struggles and the challenges and the suffering, and all of those things, all of those gnarly, nasty things that most people go through without using drugs, without wanting to commit suicide, with being in this world of absolute freedom from all of those things, happiness, peace, all of those things without drugs and alcohol, without the need to find the truth, without seeking for the truth, just to be. And that was my path that I chose. And it's led me to where I am today. 3 years later, I have a son who I love tremendously. I have an awesome, beautiful wife who I love tremendously. I have a home that I can call my own that her and I bought together. I have a very successful, thriving business. Those are all the halves of a normal operating life, right? But along with that comes those challenges, comes that suffering, comes that not knowing from day to day if everything is going to be okay. I think it's funny that how easily I can forget what the truth is. I oftentimes find myself worrying and afraid of what's going to happen next. And I don't know why, because I know there's nothing to be worried about. Even death is completely safe. There's nothing to worry about. But this game of life, this thing that we call life, is so overpowering that even though I know the truth, I know exactly who I am, I know who all of us are, I still struggle and suffer just like anyone else does. My only difference is I've chosen to struggle and suffer this way. I love life. I love how unique it is. I love taking advantage of every moment. It's funny when they not funny, but it's interesting when they brought me back to life. When I said that download of understanding, was simply just this realization that everything I had ever tried to do was absolutely worth nothing. When I was taking my first breath, that's what matters. At that moment, that's what matters. And how silly everything else is. So when I came back, understanding that concept of appreciating every moment, appreciating everything God has given to us, good and bad, no matter what comes our way, we are happy with what we are given, good or bad. And that's my first video.